because I have had 53 books grace my hands this year, and we are going to go through them, we are going to talk about them, and we are going to rank them from the very, very worst right through to the very, very best 5-starers. Now, all of these books, although yes, they've been through my hands, there are actually quite a few DNFs in here. If I have done a DNF, I will let you know why. We're actually going to start right at the bottom with the DNF. So we're going to go from 53 right through to number 1. Are you ready? Because I feel like this is going to be quite a long video, potentially the longest video I have ever done. I've written everything down in my notebook, so I've got it all in front of me. I know exactly what is what. And to be fair, I'd forgotten that I had read some absolute gemmy blinders. We are going to start right at the bottom place at number 53. This was a very, very quick DNF. It was The List by Yomi Adegoke. Now, I purchased this book literally based on the cover. The colours, the emoji, it all pulled me in. And I had really high hopes for a bit summer vibe kind of read. And it just fell so flat. The characters I just couldn't connect with. I couldn't relate to. They annoyed me. The story felt like it was going absolutely nowhere. The kind of tone of voice and the narrative that was used throughout it, I found really, really hard to gel with. It was a very, very quick and very unfortunate DNF. And coming in at number 52 was The Den of Vipers. Now, The Den of Vipers, I ended up feeling so strongly about. I am not a huge dark romance reader. Dark romance is not my favourite kind of genre, but I will give it a go. And the ones that I have read, I have kind of semi-enjoyed. With The Den of Vipers, for me, it was just so poorly written. The writing style, some of it really baffled me as to how it was published. The lack of storyline was immense. I do think it's really important in a dark romance to have a storyline. It cannot just be smut upon smut upon smut. And in The Den of Vipers, it just wasn't there. Also, I have quite a strong stomach. I can deal with triggers and trigger warning lists. But some of the things that are in Den of Vipers, I was just like, I don't even understand why they're there. You've got one of the male characters is obsessed with arson and fire, but not in a nice way. Like, there's no nice way really to be obsessed with that. But you understand what I mean? It was really actually gave me anxiety whenever he came into scene. There's also certain smut scenes that I'm just like, A, they are grim. It was rank to read. And B, it's so unheard of, unrealistic. It's unbelievable. It was just too much. It was a very, very, very quick DNF for me. Then at number 51, I have got The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. I want to say it's by. Now, I read this because apparently it's very, very similar to another book, The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, which we're going to come to later. Apparently they're really identical. Now, for me, a thriller, it really needs to grab me. I don't want to have to work to get into my thriller, and I really had to work for this. I DNF'd it, I think, at around 17%, just because I was bored and it just wasn't stimulating me in the right way. So that was quite a rapid no-go, not gonna lie. In at number 50 was a DNF that I feel like people are actually gonna get really annoyed at me about. But it is Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. This is a viral book. It is a book talk book. It is a much loved book within that smart, dark romance kind of community. For me, it was awful. It was horrendous. So the main problems that I had with this were, number one, it felt almost like it read quite young, but it definitely is not aimed at a young audience, and I just picked an immediate problem with that. And number two, some of the references in it just I found so off-putting. So like, you have read it, for example, there's a reference to maggots looking like orzo pasta and things like that, and it was just such an off-putting thing for me to read that I DNF'd it, I think, within the first 40 pages actually. Maybe not even that. I DNF'd it so quickly because I just knew I was never going to gel with this book. Then at number 49, we are number 49. We are on number 49. Number 49 was actually a book club book of mine. So I run Chapters in Caffeine. It's a book club that's held on Fable. And I think it was our June pick. It's The House of Grenville by B. Green. Now, this was a debut. It's an indie. So it's a self-publish. And essentially I DNF'd it because I just found far too many holes within the world building, within the editing and things like that. It's a kind of like fantasy, romantasy / dark academia. And I actually teamed up with B. Green as an author for the delivery of this book in my book club. She's a lovely, lovely human, incredibly generous, gave some of the copies away. Absolutely beautiful. And I was really gutted to have DNF'd it, but just because I teamed up with her as an author does not mean that I'm not going to be honest about my feelings with the book. Editorial wise, there was some major flaws, there was some typing errors, that it just was a little bit all over the place. When it came to the story, it felt rushed, it felt underdeveloped. The characters I just couldn't bond with, there wasn't enough depth to them, and it all just felt a bit mishmashed. So for me, that unfortunately did become a DNF. Number 48 was Notice by Heather Lewis. This was a really random pick for me. It was a little bit obscure, a little bit out of the way. I actually really can't remember what it was about. It's a very short book, but I know that I DNF'd it probably around 40-50%. I really tried to get through it and I just couldn't. It was one of those stories that's it felt kind of like it wasn't going anywhere, and it didn't have enough of a storyline and enough substance to please me, so I just let it go. And I actually ended up giving my copy away in hopes that somebody else liked it more than I did. Coming in at number 47, we have Mad Honey. Now this was I predicted this to be a 5-star read. I predicted it to be a 5-star read, and I DNF'd. And I not only singularly DNF'd, I treble DNF'd this book. That is how badly I wanted to get through it and I wanted to read it. So I had seen so many other creators rave about Mad Honey, say how incredible it was. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so geared up for it. The cover was stunning, author-wise, Jodie, chef's kiss. I was like, I'm gonna love this book. It dragged, it was so boring, it was so bland, and everybody kept saying to me, just get to the twist, but it's quite a thick book, it's quite hefty, and the twist was so deep, it was so far in, I just didn't want to get to it. So I DNF'd it the first time, and then I came back to it literally about a week later. I was like, come on, let's try and get through this. No, DNF'd it again. Tried it on audiobook because somebody said give it a go on audio, you might find it better. I DNF'd it again. And in the end, that was the final DNF. I was done. It was over. I just could not bring myself to get through this book. And there was not a single part of me that regretted what I did or wants to go back. Even with that twist, I don't care enough. I genuinely don't. That's how off-putting it was for me. Number 46, I have A Game of Hearts and Heists from Ruby Rowe. Now, I will be transparent, Ruby Rowe was kind enough to send me this copy, and just because it was sent to me doesn't mean that I'm not going to be honest, I DNF this book. So it is a sapphic romantasy that, quite honestly, I really, really struggled. Again, this is in the self-published realm, and for me, the writing style was really hard to digest. I couldn't get on with it. The world building I really struggled with. I just couldn't connect with it. But then I am a gay woman. So I am always looking for that sapphic read, for that read that is going to pull me in, that's I'm going to relate to, that I'm going to find something in there where I think I can understand that and I can work with that. And I had such high hopes that is exactly what was going to happen here. And I know that Ruby Rowe sells her books on spice. I know that Ruby Rowe likes to create very spicy lesbian books. My issue is that the level of spice in a book, I like to look at and think I could see me doing that or that happening, or just actually vibe with the spice, if that makes sense. And I couldn't in this book. For context, There's certain scenes that involve somebody just being pre-strapped in public, and that just, it doesn't work with me, and it felt a little bit fetishized, which makes me feel really uncomfortable. And I was already struggling kind of with the story and working my way through it. And I had a look on Goodreads and saw that there was actually some ableist language in the book. And I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to step away. So Ruby Rowe is a very well-loved author within her community. And what she's done by building the community she's had is absolutely brilliant. And I would hate to bring negativity upon that. But at the same time, I constructively need to be honest, I had to DNF. And I always get referred back to these books. People always say to me, oh, you need to read this because you're looking for a sapphic book. I just can't. I'm sorry, I can't. Number 45 was a really, again, surprising DNF for me. It's from an author I love, John Marrs, The Family Experiment. Now, this was my July book club pick, and I DNF'd this at about 45%. And honestly, it blew my mind. First off, there was too many characters. There was too much going on for me to get a grips with, for me to try and understand. I just couldn't gel with the volume of characters that were in this book. Secondly, the plot just wasn't developing at a fast enough pace for me. And I was about to go on holiday, and I just thought, when I'm on holiday, I want reads that I can digest, that I can enjoy, that I can lap up. And I knew that wasn't going to be it. Again, I tried to move to audiobook for this to try and speed it through quicker, but I just didn't connect. I just felt bored. So I DNF'd it. Number 44. Again, I feel like I'm going to upset some people with this one. I'm sorry. I am sorry. Number 44 was The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Before you come at me, I do feel like this is a Marmite of a book. I haven't watched the TV series. I'm not a big TV person, so for me, I will always read the book before I watch the series. I genuinely feel like with this, maybe I do need to watch the TV series. I'm still bookmarked where I left this. So I'm on page 134, so chapter 23. I'm a significant way into this book. I have absolutely fuck all idea what's going on. I have no idea what's happening. I don't know why she's there. I don't know what this world is that she's living in. I don't know anything. I don't understand anything. And I don't doubt that it does start to tie together. I don't doubt that it does. People rave about this book. But for me, I don't want to have to fight that far into a book to understand it. It lost me, and I just was like, no. I don't want to pick this up and read it. I'm not drawn in enough or intrigued to want to keep going. So again, DNF'd. And it's quite sad as well because I actually have the testaments. That's how much I wanted to dedicate myself to this book, but I could not pull through with it. At number 43, I've got The It Girl by Ruth Ware. Now, I did finish this book. I rated it at 1.5 stars. Should have DNF'd. I really should have DNF'd. It's my first and only Ruth Ware. I don't know if it's put me off of her as an author. The characters were insufferable. They were intolerable. The book itself for a thriller was boring. It just was anticlimactic. It was going nowhere. It was one of those books where I was like, I'm just picking this up to get through it. Like, I just want to get through this fucking book. So 1.5 star for me, very low rated. Then I go into number 42, which was really good actually. I scored this between a 1.5 and a 2, maybe 1.75. It's so drab. It's so boring. And the premise of this book should have been so good. Like, we're talking about a divorcee and a change in life and breaking friendships and adulthood, and it was so boring. I don't mean to be horrible, but it just wasn't happening. It wasn't going anywhere. It's marked on the cover as like comedic. There was no comedy value. The main character was just, she annoyed me. She aggravated me, and there was no point. I read a chunky book, got to the end and was like, I've not read a story. I've just read a bunch of words. So I feel quite strongly about that one. Sorry. 41 is a little novella. This is Lifers by Casey Bloom. I actually read this in July. I couldn't really tell you much about this book, if I'm honest. I don't really know how to rate it. It is sapphic. It's about two women. It's based in a mental institution. It focuses quite a lot on mental health and mental health issues. but it just felt, I don't even remember what I read. I didn't absorb any of this, which is really unfortunate, especially for such a little novella. Normally with a novella I'm like, please pack a punch, but it just didn't. So that came through a really low rating. I genuinely wouldn't be able to say read it. At number 40 we have got Before the Coffee Gets Cold. Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshigaki Kawazuku. Is that how I say it? Let me check that, because if that's not how I say it, I'm gonna Toshikazu Kawaguchi. Said that totally wrong. Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I had seen these all over my book talk, all over TikTok, and thought, oh, that sounds so whimsical, it sounds so magical, it sounds so beautiful. It was one of my first translated reads, so it's translated from Japanese, and it's based upon going into a coffee shop and being able to sit in a certain seat and drink a cup of coffee that's going to take you anywhere in time that you want to be. But the deal is you have to finish the cup of coffee before it gets cold to return back. And the premise of it sounds so lovely, it really, really does, but it just fell so flat. Again, it bored me. It really did bore me. It understimulated me, and it's a really little book as well, but it took me so long to get through it because I just didn't want to pick it up. A couple of the characters were just vile. I really didn't like them. And I actually had the next one in the series, because this is a series. I had the next one. I haven't even read it. I gave them both away. It's a much loved book, but for me, it was not there. It just did nothing for me at all. At number 39, I have possibly one of the weirdest books I've read this year, Paradise Rot by Jenny Havell. I picked this up in Gaze the Word in London. So it is sapphic based. It's based about two women. I cannot tell you, it's obviously like a little novella. I cannot tell you a single thing from this book apart from the fact that the main character is obsessed with pee, with urination. I have never read a book that features so much urination in my life. To the end of it, and I was like, is she okay? Why, Jenny, are you all right, babe? Blink twice. What's happened? What's going on? Really odd. Definitely would not recommend. The irony that I'm coming in with this one at number 38 is Mating with Mallows. Now, Mating with Mallows took me 17 minutes to read. I found it on Kindle Unlimited. You can guess what's happening by the title. It's about a woman that mates with marshmallows. It was really, really weird, but also really humorous. Gave me a great laugh. I don't actually feel like I can rate it. How can I rate that book? I just can't. But it was a ride. We're gonna leave that one there. At number 37, I have Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Tales from the Crematorium by Caitlin Doughty. This probably comes as a bit of a shocker. Again, this is a very, very well loved book. It's a bit more of a memoir. I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I found it, there were parts of it that I really, really loved. The parts where she actually speaks about the crematorium, about the industry, about death and things like that. I really enjoyed those. But there was far too much focus from about halfway through the book onwards on her personal life and her life. And in brutal honesty, that's not why I was reading the book. I wasn't reading the book to find out about the author. I was reading the book to understand the loss industry and crematoriums and stuff like that. So I found it really boring. I actually didn't finish maybe the last 10 pages, and it made no difference to my understanding of the context of the book. I rated it literally like 2.5 stars, and I'm gutted because I really wanted to rate this higher. 36 is Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. I'm sorry, but what the fuck is this book? What is it? What happened? It's huge. This is a big book to get through, and it's just a load of info dumping. That's really the main thing that happens in here. And so many readers were like, oh my God, the ending, get to the ending. And I got to the ending and I was like, what was that? There is not a single part of me that is excited for the third coming out. Like, I wish I had DNF'd this, if I'm brutally honest. It felt rushed. It felt like she was just pushed to get a book out there. And it is so unfortunate because it fell so flat. At 35, we have Eliza Clark's Boy Parts. Again, I really thought I was going to love this book and I just didn't. It just made no sense to me. It made no sense. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't build to anything. It didn't achieve anything. It felt like I was reading the same page over and over and over again. It was another book where I think I missed the final maybe 10-15 pages, and it made absolutely no difference to the comprehension and understanding of that book. I skimmed them, read the last page and was like, okay, I've easily could have read the first page and the last page, and I genuinely feel like I would have got the same outcome. It really frustrated me, that book. Number 34 was Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent. Now, do not come at me, thriller readers. I love a thriller book. I really do. I read this right in its peak of prime of hype, when everyone was going on and on about it. And what pulls me in is the fact that she literally throws her dad out with the bins when he dies. It had so much potential and it just did not deliver. It didn't. It was a bit all over the place. It was lost. Sally as a character, I loved her. She was great. She was absolutely fantastic. But I actually had quite strong views on this at the time, and the thing that everybody loved about it, I didn't love. I just couldn't fall in love with this book. I also hated the comparison of Sally being autistic, but she wasn't actually autistic, but she carried a lot of autistic traits, and it was all just too messy. It was all too blurry. I didn't enjoy it, and it was so unfortunate because I really thought that I was going to. At number 33, I have Cows by Matthew Stocko. This was my first ever buddy read with Grace's Book Nook over on TikTok. And oh my god, what a buddy read. I'm not a horror reader. I'm not. And this is horror. And it's frankly disturbing, disgusting, and I felt like I needed to cleanse my entire soul, body and mind after reading it. I would never ever advise anybody to read this book unless they like horror. It's not even really well written. A lot of parts of it are forever burned into my retina, and I wish that I could delete it, and I just can't. I just cannot. It is disturbing and obscene on a whole new level for me, and ironically, I want to read more horror after reading this. That surprised me. Wasn't expecting that one. Number 32 is Ninth House. Ninth House was a battle, right? And even though I rate this book a 4 stars, I hated 80% of it. It was only the final 20% that won me over and that I enjoyed and got that 4-star mark. And because it was such a slog, because it was such a hard read, that's why it comes in this low on my chart. I am never going to be the biggest fantasy reader. I'm never going to be the biggest dark academia reader, but I really struggled to understand a lot of this book. So much of it still is lost on me. I have Hellbent. It's waiting on my TBR. I picked it up, put it back down. I just don't feel enticed to go back into it and to finish that duology. But the irony is at the end of Ninth House, I was championing for the main character. I was really enjoying myself, but I so hated how I felt as I was reading this book. It was a nightmare for me to get through. Number 31 is Priest by Sierra Simone. To be fair, this is a bit of a neutral book for me. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it, I didn't like it. It was just there. It was like a palate cleanser in a bit of a slump. I always try and read a book that's a little bit different from my normal genre. It's kind of smutty, not quite dark romancy, but also not romancy. It's basically about a priest that does very naughty things. He does things that a priest shouldn't do. And it was just okay. It was all right. There was some, very spicy scenes in there, but I can imagine if this is your normal type of genre, you're probably going to eat this up and absolutely love this book. But for me, it's not my normal type. So it was just a bit of neutral, almost like a 3-starer, which, let's be honest, no one wants a 3-star. At number 30, I have Brother Do You Love Me by Manny and Ruben Coe. Now, again, this is a memoir. It's about 2 brothers, one of whom has Down syndrome, and the other brother becomes his carer in many senses. He is his carer. It is beautifully written. It is littered with pictures that Ruben has drawn. It is a lovely book. But I just think for me personally, I really struggle with memoirs. I struggle to rate them highly. It's quite a hefty book to get through in the sense that parts really struggled to connect with it, and then other parts I didn't. There's nothing wrong with this book. It is so insightful. I think it delivers really well. But for me, it's just a kind of type of book and a style of book that I just don't always gel with. I'm really glad that I read it, but it's not going to be a high rater for my year this year. At number 29, we have Notes on an Execution by Danica Kafka. This was a book that I thought it was going to be a 5-star, and it wasn't. It's another one where I've learned now to stop predicting 5-stars and just let books play out as they are. This was a really tough one, because I think what they really wanted to deliver was the voice of the women. It was the voice of the victims, whereas actually I felt more intrigued by the voice of the killer, Ansel Packer. We follow his final 12 hours on death row, and it was his voice and his story that intrigued me far more than the story of his victims and the women involved. And that, I don't think, is what the author was trying to achieve. I gave it a bit of a 3.5. It was a bit meh. A lot of people have said, oh, I think that's going to turn into a classic. I personally can't see it turning into a classic. I do advise people to read it because I'm always intrigued on what they took from it. But for me, it just fell flat. It didn't deliver. And one of the characters in here, I think it was the female police officer, I just couldn't stand her. I genuinely couldn't stand her as a character. And every time she came up, and she was in this quite a lot, I was like, I just don't want to read your parts. That's how much you're annoying me. So a little bit unfortunate on that one. At 28, I have my first and my only Frida McFadden read, The Housemaid. Now, Frida McFadden is not an author that I'm going to race to read again. She's not my favourite author. I think she makes very good entry-level thrillers. And what I mean by that is, if you're not used to thriller books, if you're not used to the thriller world, they're very fast-paced, they're very twisty, they're very turny, they're very easy to digest. This easily read in 1 to 2 days. But for me, it lacked depth, it lacked character development. I knew there was going to be a lot of twists in it, but it was just lacking across the board. So yes, Frida, great for a thriller entry, so to speak, because they're not complicated, in-depth thrillers. But I've got the next one to this, The Other Housemaid, and I've not picked it up, and I probably won't ever pick it up, if I'm honest. We're on number 25. Where are we? We're on 27. I think we're on number 27. Let's go with that. You watch, I'll edit this back and I'll be like, oh my god, I've got my numberings completely wrong. Or I'll get to number 1 and actually I'm going to say it's number 2 or something, and it's going to absolutely throw me. Lisa Jules, Then She Was Gone. I really like Lisa as an author. I think Lisa Jules is a brilliant author. I understand Then She Was Gone was not written to have twists. I know that. Now, for me in a thriller, I do love a twist. This doesn't have any, and I get that that's the point. But it was just a little bit too predictable for me. It was a little bit too dry. It was just a story that was well read, a story that was well written, but not complex enough for me. And I know that's probably going to split a lot of people's hairs. I rate it as around a 3.5. It did lack. So it kind of comes out that halfway mark. It's not a memorable book. At number 25, we have We All Want Impossible Things. Now, it's almost close to being like a novella. Maybe it is a novella. It actually took me quite a few days to get through. So it really plays on adult friendships and the strength of adult friendships, especially when somebody's end of life. So we follow a character that she's dying of cancer. She's in a hospice, and her best friend and their journey. And it is actually really beautifully written. It isn't a book that's like kind of my memory. It's not powerful enough to be like that, but I did enjoy it. It's quite emotional in places. It packs a punch for quite a small book, to be fair, but it's not, again, one that's going to stick with me forever. I want to make this clear that I am not recommending people to read this book, okay? I am not at all. It's packed full of triggers. A lot of people don't like it. There's a big community against it. However, if I enjoyed a book, if I took a book for what it was and I went into it knowingly, I'm going to be honest about it. And for me, Haunting Adeline by H.D. Colton, I enjoyed. It's quite grotesque. Yes, there's a lot of triggers in there. Yes, it's basically just constantly saying SA is okay. Yes, glorifying stalking. But it is written in a way where the storyline does develop, and ultimately we go from SA to Griel and falling in love. And it's you have to go into a book like Haunting Adeline understanding what it is, and understanding that you are reading a story. You are reading something that is made up and it is not real. That's my view on it anyway. I did enjoy it. I don't necessarily recommend it. I don't really make much content about it. It's a book that I actually was like, I got to the end and I was rooting for Zaid and Addie, and I didn't think I would be. Number 23, we have Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed it. I know a lot of people, hardcore fantasy readers, will be like, it's not fantasy. Maybe it's not. I don't know what it is. It was my first introduction to the fantasy world. The world building was really easy to get on board with. The characters were really likeable. The writing wasn't overly done. It wasn't overly complicated. It didn't feel intimidating. And I fell in love with the fucking dragons. And Dana will have my heart forever. Like, I loved Fourth Wing. So for Iron Flame to be such a letdown actually broke my heart a little bit, because I enjoyed this. At number 22 is the author that most people would never expect me to have in my hands, and that is Emily Henry and Happy Place. Now, the reason I picked this up and the reason that I read this is because I'm writing my own sapphic romance, because I really struggled to find sapphic romance on the shelves. Now, I went into this thinking it was going to be absolutely crap, that I really wasn't going to enjoy it, that I wasn't going to like Emily Henry, that I wasn't going to find any relation because it's about a man and a woman. Look how much I annotated this book. I enjoyed this book. I loved it. Emily Henry's writing style is delicious. I could eat it up. It's so easy to consume. It was such a nice, light, feel-good read. I've actually now gone on to buy a further 2 Emily Henry books. I actually rated this quite highly. It does come in at a 4-star for me, and I don't know if that's just because I didn't expect it. A lot of people are like, oh, it's not her best. Like, I didn't really like Happy Place, but I did. I really liked it. I love the way that she describes things in her writings. I love her descriptive words. They're just stunning. Number 21 is the Mind series by St. Abbey. Now, this is technically 5 books in one. It is, because they are considered to be 5 on Goodreads, on Kindle, on all of the apps, but I just got the big version of it. I again went into this thinking I'm not really going to like it. It's actually not. I thought it was going to be really dark romance. It's not dark romance. It's not at all. It's actually quite an intriguing story that the characters develop and the characters blossom, and they do have layers. And I think the only book that I didn't really connect with very much was book number 3 off the top of my head. That was the one that I struggled with the most. But overall, this is the only series I have ever read back to back. And I think even if I'd had the 5 separate books, I still would have read it back to back. I actually really enjoyed it. Number 20, Please Don't Come For Me, is Credence, which is a very recent read for me. I only finished it last week. I went into it pretty much blind. I went into it not knowing what I was going to go into. Now, I'm going to be off the bat say a couple of things. Number 1, it's very problematic. I could not get behind that main character's age. I hated that. In my brain, I convinced myself she was in her like 20s. I think that's what got me through the book. I really, really didn't like that. Number 2, getting behind the fact that that's a family. Again, that's something I could work with. Like, it lost me on that bit a little bit. They may not be blood related, but ultimately they were people that were meant to be taking care of her. Put those things out of the way. The writing style, I really enjoyed it. It was really easy to consume. It was really easy to watch develop. The actual storyline that was tucked underneath all of the problematic weird things was excellent. The development of Caleb was great. Like, I really, really enjoyed those things. I think from the offset, as soon as I realised where this story was going to go a little bit, maybe some of the context that I was going to be reading, and also the character's age, I mentally just said to myself, just remember, again, you are reading a story. You are reading something that's made up, and just persevere and get through. And I'm glad that I did, because in the end, I was absolutely jumping for joy for those main characters. I loved what was happening and really, really enjoyed this book, which really, really surprised me. Also, those spicy scenes are very, very spicy, and coming from a gay girl, Jesus Christ, like, some of them burnt into my memory. And that's an achievement. That is an achievement. Number 19, we have John Marr's The Marriage Act. Now, this book, I fought my way through this book. For about 70% of it, I was like, oh my God, where am I going with this? I was like, I'm going to hate this. I'm going to end up hating it. I ended up rating it 4.5 stars. Excellent book. A lot of me wanted to DNF, and I'm so glad that I didn't. Is that kind of like speculative fiction, almost like feels dystopian, but I thoroughly enjoyed it in the end, and I'm so glad that I persevered with this, because it's actually gonna, I think, continue to rate quite highly throughout my year. Number 18, I hope we're on number 18. I hope we're on the right course, because this is a lot of numbers to try and remember. I've got Sophie Kinsilla's The Burnout. I picked this up randomly in Waterstones, and I picked it up for the title, and I just thought, like, is that a book that I'm gonna read and take something from? And I genuinely did. I fell in love with this book. It made me fall in love with Sophie Kinsella all over again. She's a brilliant author, such an easy to read author. A lot of people have come back and said, oh, I didn't like it, it's not her best. And I'm like, maybe not, but I think sometimes, like, have a book that just comes along and it feels like a hug. And that's what this was for me. It just felt like a warm hug of, like, this is the book that I needed, and I didn't know that I needed it at that point in time. And I am so glad that I picked it up, and so glad that I read it. A lot of you guys over on BookTok have actually read this off the back of my review, and so many of you have come back and said the same, like, we didn't know we needed that book at that point in time. It's such a lovely, delightful, easy little read. At number 17, I have a beautiful sapphic romance. It is Dahlia Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. I actually have the full trilogy of this. I've just not got around to reading the other two yet. It was sapphic, romantic, non-spicy, and I really respect that. Ashley Herring Blake got her point across. She represented lesbian women without spice, and that is exactly what I was looking for when I picked this up. It was really nice to read. Slightly cringy in places, but I think you're always going to have cringe in romance. And overall, like, I'm really excited to read the next one, which I think is Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail, and then you've got Iris Kelly Doesn't Date as well. Like, they're just easy to consume romances that I think really represent lesbian women really nicely. And number 16 is Alice Feeney's Daisy Darker. This was a recommendation from my uncle, and boy did he deliver on that one. Again, it's a very recent read for me. I only finished it the week before last. It's a thriller come kind of murder like mystery, a little bit Agatha Christie-ish, like who's done it, but it also has a huge twist at the end, and that twist blew my mind. I did not see the twist come in. She layered it and hid it so beautifully and so well, and it actually really made me excited to read more Alice Feeney, because I'm like, okay, like, you can write. Like, that was a real good book for me. I really enjoyed it. Number 16. No, it's not 16. Is it 16? Is it 16 or 15? One second. Number 16. I think I might have got my numbers wrong the whole way through this video. So if you've made it this far, I do apologise. Genuinely, I apologise for my behaviour on that one. The Doll Factory by Elizabeth McNeil. So this is a historical fiction. It rated so highly for me. This is like a 4.75 stars. I loved this book. I love historical fiction anyway at the best of times, but it's set in 1850 London. It's about a woman that's kind of breaking boundaries for women at the time, and she wants to be an artist, and then this really shady figure comes along, and it all unfolds, and she is just so strong. There's so much female power in this book. I really enjoyed it when I read it. Number 15, we have Taylor Jenkins Reid and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Now, at the time of reading this, I rated this 5 stars. I'm actually going to take it down to a 4.5, just because over time my tastes have developed and grown a little bit more. I loved this book for the representation. So not only does it represent LGBTQ+, wish actually that was a bit more of a marketing point for it. I genuinely do, because it represents it so well, but it also represents cultures, diversities, domestic violence, racism. There's so much representation in this book, and I do have to give credit where it's due. Jenkins Reid comes through, and she does deliver very well in this. I actually gave it to my mum, and my mum DNF'd it, which really did surprise me. There is like a mute point kind of in the middle where it gets a bit dry and it gets a bit draggy, but then it kind of turns towards the end and everything starts slotting together, and I was like, oh my god, like, wow. It is a brilliant book. it deserves the hype I think that it has received. Number 14 was a really big surprise to me. It's the last list of Mabel Beaumont, and I downloaded this really randomly on Kindle Unlimited, and I almost thought it was just going to be like a palette cleanser book. I didn't think it was going to be anything. I actually don't know what it was that drew me to read it when I did. What I did not know going into this is one of the most beautiful like LGBT romance stories that I've read this year. It has so much representation in it. It's stunning to read. It's so easy to digest. And I don't know why we haven't heard more about this, especially in sapphic spaces, because we basically follow an older lady who's just lost her husband, who then goes on to find the love of her life. And it really is beautiful. It showcases as well like life after death and going on once you've lost your spouse, and it really is a lovely read. I actually feel like I need to make more content on this and encourage more people to read it. Number 13, I have The Lost Bookshop by Evie Woods. Now, this is such a stunning book. Oh my God, what a book. It's like reading a child's book, but an adult book. And I know that's like a really weird statement to make, but you know when you're a kid and you're reading like a book and it gives you that like fuzzy, whimsical, magical, warm feeling, that's what this done to me. It delivered all of those feelings that I used to get when I was a kid reading a book, but in an adult format. And although, yes, it is very whimsical and it is very magical, it's also so relevant. It's so excellently executed. 3 characters across varying timelines. Like, it is incredibly well done. Evie Woods is a very, very, very talented author. Very, very talented. This was a 5-star read for me. And from this point actually onwards, for the rest of the video, we're going to be talking my 5-star reads of the year. So buckle up, because this was the first one. And if I could reread this book again, I would. My next 5-star and number 12 is John Marr's The One. Now, this is speculative fiction. It's got that dystopian vibe to it. It's based on basically finding your soulmate and your perfect partner through a DNA swab. And every one of us in the world has that soulmate and we have that partner. It is so beautifully executed. It makes you think. It is brilliant. It is brilliant. And this is probably a book where actually, because it's quite a lot of depth to it, I will go back and I will reread at some point, because I want to be able to take even more from it. So yeah, 100% recommend. This was one of the books that I didn't expect to understand and love as much as I did. We then, at number 11, have another John Marr's. Can you understand why I really was shocked by The Family Experiment? Because John Marr's I've always rated highly. It's The Stranger in Her House, and this is a straight up thriller. This is a blinding book. It is absolutely blinding. It was an easy 5-star read for me. I devoured it. It was so choppy, so changing. It was so satisfying. Absolutely stunning. If there's one thing John Marr's does well, I think it is a thriller. At number 10, we have another thriller, and this is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This again was a 5-star. It is a book that just delivered on such a high level. It's quite like almost social media-y based. It's about a podcast. It's about somebody with like quite a nice following who's quite well known, and then somebody like that literally is on the opposite end of the scale, and how she weaves her way into her life. I really enjoyed it. I've not heard very many negative like reviews about this. I think this is possibly one of Lisa Jewell's absolute best, and it easily comes in my top 10 for the year so far. Number 9, I have In at the Deep End by Kate Davies. Now, this is sapphic, so it's about 2 women. It's lesbian based. It goes through all of the hidden depths of a lesbian relationship that you may not necessarily talk about, and it shows the toxicity of lesbian relationships. It shows the struggles of lesbian relationships. It also has so much spice in it that is what I would call real life spice. So it's not spice that's just been chucked in for the sake of it. It's spice that's relevant to the book, it's relevant to the scenes, and it's the kind of spice that actually happens in your bedroom, if that makes sense. It's like relatable spice. All right, is a little bit on the extreme side, but let's face it, that's what sapphics are like. So I loved this book. It was a 5-star read for me, and loads of you guys that then went on Reddit off the back of it have messaged me and they're like, oh my god, how good is In at the Deep End? I'm like, I know, right? I have got her next book, Nuclear Family, in hardback. She's a beautiful writer, so easy to read, so nice. I loved her writing style. I love what she does for the community. I love the representation in here. It was brilliant. It was an absolutely brilliant book. At number 8, I have The Betrayal of Thomas True by AJ West. Now, if you follow me on Book Talk, you'll know that I actually end up working on the book launch of this. I was first sent a PR package, so I'm going to mark anything I need to mark right now, and I fell in love with it. It's a historical fiction, but it has got an air of romance to it. It follows 2 men in Georgian London and the struggles that they had to go through being gay men, being in love. It takes you through molly houses. It shows you the historical side of it, but also the kind of depths and the emotional gravity of how life was back then, especially for LGBTQ plus humans. It's insane. AJ West is a human. I love him as well. I think he's absolutely beautiful. He's brilliant. He's worked so hard on this book. He deserves every single bit of success he's got for it, and he easily was going to come in my top 10 this year. It's a 5-star read, and I actually own 4 copies, including the special limited edition copy. I say special limited edition, that's actually a first edition. So you never know, maybe one day. At number 7, I have Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. Now, this is definitely a weird girl book, okay? It's very speculative. It doesn't necessarily go anywhere. And I know that in my previous ones, I've criticised books that didn't necessarily reach a point or have a story. But I do feel like this has a story. And what this played on was almost like PTSD within relationships. So this is, again, it's sapphic. It's about 2 women. One is a submarinist. Is that even a word? Submariner. And she just comes back from a mission where actually she gets trapped under the sea and it's like catastrophic. Go through her journey and her wife's journey of her coming home after her wife thought that was it. She was never going to see her wife again. Although the ending is a bit weird, it is a bit odd. It is such a fantastic, beautiful book. I think there's some really important marks on it. Like, it plays so heavily on, what have I tabbed in here? Anxiety, relationship breakdowns, PTSD, thoughtful moments. Like, it's so many questions after reading this, but I still gave it a 5-star. We're nearly there. We're wrapping up now. Number 6, I have I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This is obviously a novella. This was my first ever book club read in Chapters and Caffeine, and I gave it a 5-star. Again, it's speculative. This is dystopian. You don't ever understand a lot of this book. You don't ever understand what the character's name is. You don't understand why they're where they are. You don't understand what's happened. You don't understand where's humanity gone. There is so many questions. It's unbelievable. However, it is incredible. The power behind the writing, the way that Jacqueline has delivered this story, or even lack thereof, because you're like, what was that I just read? It's mind-blowing. This was an easy far read, and one that, again, I think for years to come I probably will dip back into just to see if I can find the answer that I was so desperately seeking. We're heading into the top 5. Number 5, I have got MJ Arledge, Eye for an Eye. I read this right at the start of the year. I think it was in January, and it's still stuck with me ever since. This book is insane. It is incredible. So the premise of it is that there are 9 criminals within the UK who have been released from prison, and they've been granted, I can never say this word, anonymity. My brain cannot say. Do you ever get that? Sometimes there's just words your brain can't say. That's one of them. And they're basically anonymous. So they've got whole new lives, and you don't know that they're a criminal. And But what happens if that shield gets dropped and actually their details gets released? And that's essentially what's happening in this book, and we follow it through. There's a lot to keep up with. There's a lot of characters. It's quite fast paced, but it's absolutely amazing. And there is a giant twist in here. The reason I fell in love with this is because I could see it happening. This is a real life thing. There are people walking our streets who have done the worst of the worst, and then they've been released and they're given a whole new identity. And I was like, what would happen if that identity we found out? Like, what would happen with humanity? So this was really, really interesting concept. Absolutely brilliant. MJ Arledge is a very, very talented writer. Fantastic abilities, and I can't wait to read more. At number 4, I have A Little Life by Hanya Yangahara. Now, I have put this in here simply because I've never stopped thinking about this book. I've not stopped thinking about Jude and his friends and everything that happened in here. I made a full book talk review on this, and I openly said from the get-go, I will never, ever advise anybody to read this. I won't recommend it. I won't encourage you to read it. You need to read this, understanding what you're about to read and what you are going into. It is very, very, very trauma heavy. Now, some people see it as just trauma porn, trauma dumping. I don't. I see how it's the cascade of trauma, how one situation can create a cascade in your life and can change the path of your life. That's how I read this. And I do think if you have hints of quite deep trauma, you will be able to understand the point of what Hanya was trying to achieve. It wasn't just trauma dumping. It's like a domino effect through life. It's incredibly sad. It's incredibly heartbreaking. I didn't cry. I didn't. And at times I questioned myself, why am I not crying? I didn't. It's a piece of a book. It's a big, big book. But it's a book that will stay with me forever and ever and ever. And I just always think about Jude. Probably at least a couple of times a week. I'm like, Jude, real shit life. At number 3, I have The Redemption of Morgan Bright by Chris Panettiere. Now, this was very kindly sent to me by Angry Robot, who are the publisher. I fell in love with this book. I fell in love with everything about this book. And once again, this is a book that my brain automatically reverts back to. It thinks about it. It's so multi-layered. It's so deep. We follow a character who basically checks into a mental hospital, and she unravels, but in such a crazy way. What I really liked about this is Chris, who is a male author, tackled some serious female problems, and he done it so well. He done it so beautifully. He gave women so much credit, and he delivered through and through and through. This is quite a twisty turny little book. It's a book that actually I want to read it again. I want to go through it again. There's multimedia in here, which I loved. There's like text, interviews, there's standard paragraphs, it's great. He's a very, very talented person for delivering this book, and I don't know what it was about it that just settled in my brain, but my heart was instantly like, I love it. 5 stars. At number 2, I have The Reading List. Now, The Reading List it's an emotional, beautiful read. So we basically follow this older gentleman who's just lost his wife, who loves to read, and he then tries to understand why she loves to read. And we follow this bunch of characters, and they all revolve around this list of books. And the whole premise of the book is how reading brings you together, how books bring you together. And it was so stunning. It was so beautiful, and it caught me so off guard because I didn't really expect to love it as much as I did. I didn't expect to take from it what I did. And it was one of those ones where I kind of really want to encourage other people to read it. I was like, oh, go and read that, because I'm really intrigued to see if people take from it what I took from it and love it as much as I did. Like, I fell in love with that book, and I think I'd fall in love with it over and over and over again, time and time again. It had so much power. It had so much beauty. The reading list of books, like, I've bit by bit collecting because I'm like, I want to read them. Like, it just... lovely, also gut-wrenching book. And number 1, my top book of 2024 so far is The Girl Behind the Gates by Brenda Davies. Now, I read this in July. I read this on holiday. I've made a bunch of content on TikTok about this book. Hundreds of people, I think, have now read this book off the back of those videos that I've made, because, oh my God, is this mind-blowing. This is a true story, or is based on a true story. And we follow Nora in 1939, who gets sent to a mental hospital for being mentally defective because she falls pregnant outside of wedlock, basically. And we follow her life and her entire life stint in this mental institute, and the things that happened to her are so harrowing. It is heartbreaking. And what made this book so powerful is that it was still happening in my lifetime. We follow her in years where I was alive. It was still legal to put a woman in a mental institution as being mentally defective for being pregnant outside of wedlock. The year my mum was born, in 1959. Like, I can't even comprehend what this woman went through, the journey her life had. This is a book that will stay with me for the rest of my life. It's so impactful. It's a tough read. It's a really hard read. And there were so many times where I genuinely thought I was going to cry. And the knowledge that a lot of this isn't made up, a lot of this is genuine, this is genuinely what somebody went through, is crazy. It was recommended to me by somebody, and for love nor money I cannot remember who recommended it to me, so I wish I could say thank you, because I'm so grateful. I strongly believe that come December I'm still going to feel as passionately about this book as I do now. It was just a mind-blowing read, and for something so sad, it was so beautifully delivered. Brenda Davies came through and just told this woman's story in the most compassionate, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, but also insightful, beautiful way. There we go. That is it. I know somewhere along there I lost track of the numbers. I know somewhere along there I was saying it was number this, but actually it was number that. But ultimately, they are the 53 books that I've had in my hand this year, that I've consumed this year. And that's my feelings on them, from worst right through to the very best. I genuinely hope you enjoyed this video. If you stuck with me right through to the end, thank you so much. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, all of those things to my channel, because I would love to be able to bring you guys even more long form content. I really enjoyed making this one, and it's a little bit scary that this is my first long YouTube video. But for now, I'm going to go shoot. I'm going to try and finish my current book, which is my current book of the month with my book club, which is Death of the Bookseller. And unfortunately, I'm really struggling with it. This is the 3rd month in a row that I've had a struggle book. But I will see you guys very, very soon for even more content. In the meantime, you can find me regularly over on TikTok. It's the same username, The Book of Grace Maguire. Bye.